What was meant to be a fun day for the families gathered at the Sknyliv airfield on July 27, 2002, quickly turned into an unprecedented catastrophe. It was the 60th anniversary of the Ukrainian Air Force's 14th Air Corps, and after an epic series of brazen aerobatics showcasing aviators aboard some of the world's most impressive planes, the multitudes prepared for the spectacular grand finale. A Soviet-era 18-ton Sukhoi Su-27 fighter jet would swoop in just above the crowd in a series of high-risk aerial acrobatics. But as footage taken by spectators and news camera operators shows, the aircraft entered a rolling maneuver at a very low altitude and continued to lose height drastically as it passed close to a wooded area, its wings clipping one of the trees. The crowd then gasped as the jet violently plummeted on a direct trajectory towards a large group of people. As the maneuver was going completely out of control, the disoriented pilot screamed into his radio, quote, "Where are the spectators?" Ukrainian Air Show. As the Soviet Union dissolved in 1991, many military aircraft were left on Ukrainian territory and added to the Ukrainian Air Force's array of assets. And by 2002, the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense claimed to be in possession of 507 combat planes and 121 attack helicopters inherited from the Soviet Union. Still, most aircraft are not deemed combat-worthy, and instead are used for military ceremonies and military-hosted air shows. An especially important air show was prepared for July 27, 2002, to commemorate the 60th anniversary of the Ukrainian Air Force's 14th Air Corps, established at the onset of World War II. The event was highly anticipated, with close to 10,000 people, primarily Ukrainians, making the trip from Lviv to the Sknyliv airport, 3.7 miles from the city, to witness what was meant to be a patriotic and memorable celebration. The show's star was Ukraine's aerobatic demonstration team, the Ukrainian Falcons, an elite and experienced squad of aerobatic pilots established in 1995. They were expected to showcase their formidable skills flying the Soviet-era Sukhoi Su-27 jet fighters. To this date, the Sukhoi Su-27 is a favorite aircraft for airshow pilots and aerobatics teams due to its remarkable speed and maneuverability, empowered by its twin-engine configuration. Going back to its inception in 1985, the aircraft was designed to provide exemplary maneuverability to attain aerial superiority over the American Grumman F-14 Tomcat and F-15 Eagle. In contrast to its U.S. counterparts, the Soviet fighters can fly at an angle of attack of 30 degrees and can perform the Pugachev Cobra, an aerobatic move in which the aircraft throws the nose beyond the vertical at a rate of 70 degrees per second and then recovers to level flight. Due to its agile features, the Sukhoi Su-27 participated in numerous air shows around the world during the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. Safety requirements. Ever since the airshow tragedy at the Ramstein U.S. Air Force Base in Germany in 1988, where 2 Italian military jets crashed in midair, the security measures required for airshows have become drastically more rigorous. After that tragic event, airshows worldwide implemented a separate crowd arrangement, with the spectators placed a certain distance away from the aircraft's flight trajectories. The minimum side distance between the aerobatic display line and the crowd line is based on the aircraft's speed. There must always be at least 328 feet of space, and if the plane is flying at over 300 knots, the minimum distance increases to 750 feet. To stick to this rule, aerobatic pilots must plan their flying sequence to regain the show line without ever infringing on the separation from crowd area, and may not fly over the spectator enclosures or the parking lot under any circumstances. During the Sknyliv Air Show in 2002, pilot Lieutenant Colonel Vladimir Topinar and co-pilot Yuri Yegorov were expected to adhere to the established international safety measures. It is unknown why they didn't do so, but as they performed the closing act, their maneuvers blatantly broke every safety requirement. The day of the disaster. It was a beautiful and sunny summer day in the outskirts of Lviv as the crowds of families gathered up to witness what was meant to be a spectacular event. By 2:52 p.m., most of the airshow's itinerary was over, and it was time for the grand finale. A Sukhoi Su-27 UB fighter, in tandem with other fighters of its kind, was preparing to conduct a daring set of low-altitude maneuvers. Svetlana Bachinskaya, a 34-year-old mother of two, decided to go home before the show was over. Then everything turned into a nightmare, as Bachinskaya later recalled, quote, "The plane had already flown above us twice, and this time it was coming down on us with a horrible, unbearable noise, flying at a very low altitude right above people's heads. Then all of a sudden, there was an unnatural silence, and the plane started to clumsily tilt to the left." The Sukhoi Su-27 was executing a low-altitude maneuver, but it appeared confused about its location as it veered dangerously close to the crowds. Radio communications revealed the possible pilot's confusion when they approached the maneuver site, as he yelled, quote, "Where are the spectators?" along with an expletive. Then his co-pilot responded, quote, "I don't know where they are," followed by another expletive. Footage taken that fateful day shows that the aircraft continued to perform the low-altitude rolling maneuver as it showcased a perilous downward trajectory. The plane then rolled upright once again, but it was still descending rapidly. Its left wing then dropped shortly, hitting the top of several nearby trees before the aircraft violently impacted the ground. At that point, the crew ejected the plane. The pilotless fighter began to skid over the ground towards a stationary aircraft, striking a sideways blow against the nose of an IL-76 transport aircraft before bursting into flames and cartwheeling into a large group of spectators. People ran for their lives as the rolling plane continued on its path of destruction before finally stopping. Aftermath. The tragedy that resulted in 77 casualties and over 500 injured was entirely blamed on the pilots. 2 days after the accident, the Ukrainian Prosecutor General stated that the pilots had used an illegal flight path. Ukraine's Air Force commander was promptly discharged from duty and detained, along with 2 officers involved in the organization, and the authorities called the incident an issue of military negligence. Still, many analysts suggested that there was more to the story. A commercial pilot who worked at the airbase told Ukrainian Weekly that the airshow had been moved from the field's opposite end at the last minute, which meant that the crowd separation would have to be hastily reorganized. The pilot also alleged that another aviator who was supposed to perform that day opted out, citing inadequate location preparation. The extent of influence that the last-minute change had on the pilot's understanding of the crowd's location is unclear. However, an aerobatic pilot reviewing the crash footage said that it looked as if the maneuver was planned to be parallel to the spectators' line, but instead it was performed heading towards them. As they defended themselves, the pilots claimed that the flight map they received did not match the actual airshow layout. The chief pilot also contended that he had requested additional training flights at Sknyliv airfield so that they could practice on site. Still, the request was denied as it was deemed too costly. The aviators were eventually found guilty of failing to follow orders, negligence, and violating flight rules. The pilot was sentenced to 14 years in prison, while the co-pilot would have to serve 8 years, but President Viktor Yushchenko reduced his sentence. The other 3 officials were also jailed for failing to halt the flight in time and for not securing a sufficient security zone. Despite the pilot's efforts to have the blame shared with 4 Air Force ex-generals that helped organize the event, the Supreme Court of Ukraine rejected the motions, and some even believe that the pilots were used as scapegoats to hide significant systemic issues in the command structure of the Ukrainian military. Thank you for watching our video. Do you think the military's top brass was to blame for the tragic accident? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to our other Dark Documentaries channels for more history-inspired content. Stay tuned.